Seriously though, and more formally, this is Eric Migicovsky. Migicovsky. Okay. In practice, and I did it wrong. He's CEO and founder of Pebble, and I've heard his presentation before, and it's a good little story on how he started and the use on crowdfunding and what you did there, and then you went on to raise money, and kind of what you're doing now. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the iWatch and competition, and open it up to questions from the audience.
Yeah.
And I asked earlier, but I want to ask again. I mean, how many people here have a wearable? Two? Or I'll raise my own hand. Anyone have a Pebble? All right. Eric, your namesake from Lumnos. More than one wearable? Okay. The company got founded in 2009.
Yes.
Now, if I asked that same question 5 years ago, no one would be raising their hand. Maybe people had a Garmin, but no one would have brought it.
I think at that point, phones were the only thing people were actually like carrying and wearing on themselves.
Exactly. So what did you see in 2009 when the company got founded? So I will maybe explain what Pebble is. It's a wearable. It's a watch interface that connects to the iPhone and Android only. Yes, via Bluetooth. So what did you see 5 years ago then?
Well, it started off with cycling. I love biking, and I was living in Europe at the time, and everyone there bikes every single day. I think something like 80 or 90% of the population bikes to and from the train station, to and from work. And I had this brand new phone, and biking in Holland, it's all about cobblestone roads and canals and everything. And while Dutch people, I think, are bored with this gene that lets you text and bike at the same time.
Is that legal?
It's more than legal. It's like required, and you're just like biking along. I didn't have that. I'm half Dutch, so I half had the ability to do that, I guess. But I didn't want to drop my phone into the canal. There's canals everywhere. So I figured, couldn't there be another way for me to see who's texting or who's emailing or who's calling me without having, like, when you feel that vibration in your pocket? And so the first Pebble was actually a bike computer. And it was going to be one of those like speedometer bike computers, but it would show you who's calling or emailing you instead of speed. And then one of my buddies, after I built a prototype of this, he said, that bike computer you've got, you could just attach that to my wrist so I could see who's calling when I'm not on my bike. And I was like, wow, that's actually a pretty cool idea. And so I went back to Waterloo, Ontario, which, now put yourself back in 2008. Can anyone name what company was in Waterloo, Ontario? It still is in Waterloo, Ontario. Starts with, well, they were this phone that had a keyboard on it. You guys know what I'm talking about. So the first watch worked exclusively with BlackBerry. Had to play the hometown heroes a little bit. Waterloo is the only place in the world, I went back a couple weeks ago, that you go to a bar and you go out and there's still people on BBM. And the whole city's still on BBM. It's interesting.
I think there are Blackberries here.
I've seen one.
Yeah, I've seen a few.
Does anyone have a passport? I really want to get my hands on one. We made this product in 2008, worked with BlackBerry. We originally just made it ourselves in the garage. We would go to a metal shop and they would cut, using a CNC milling machine, the form of the watch. We bought the electronics off of DigiKey, which is just an electronics part supplier. We built them ourselves. Had some high school students to do like final assembly. So we had this like mini assembly line going in the garage.
Now at that point, how were you funding operations?
We had those. Have you guys ever done like elevator pitch competitions where you go up and you have to say your pitch in like 30 or 45 seconds? I would do those and get paid in these, if I won, these gigantic checks that are very difficult to cash. And so the early funding came from those. I won about $5,000 in various pitch competitions. My parents invested $15K. I was extremely lucky to have parents who could loan me that kind of money. I think they said it was cheaper than an MBA at the time. So, and we built the first watch. It was called Impulse. It was worked with BlackBerry. It did exactly what we set out to do. Just showed text messages on your wrist. In fact, we took it so far that the first version of software didn't tell the time on the watch. It only showed text messages.
Forgot to add a watch to the
It was the first button for it. I got it from my dad. He was just like, Eric, I want my smartwatch to show the time. So naturally, we had this process. Actually, at the time, it was quite revolutionary. We were doing over-the-air firmware updates on a weekly basis with Watch. Nowadays, Xiaomi does this for every single Android phone that they have every week. We were doing it back then for the couple hundred Pebble users we had. But it was great because we had this really close contact to our customers. We knew on a practically daily basis what was pissing them off, what bugs we had, and then we pushed fixes out to them and break other things. But we fixed, we added the ability to tell the time to our smartwatch pretty quickly. Those were the early days. That was 2009, 2010. We got accepted into Y Combinator, which is a startup incubator here down in Mountain View. That was why we moved the company from from Waterloo down to Mountain View. It was just for that. We had been working for 3 years up until that point, and we had a bit of success. We had sold about 1,000 watches at that point, which we thought was pretty cool. We had no VC funding, we just a little bit of money from Y Combinator. We were making money, we were selling product. We were charging people $150 for what was effectively an alpha product at the time. Super early stage, constantly fixing bugs. If people had a problem, they'd mail it back to us, and we just mailed them a complete replacement. And that was, I think, the right environment to latch on to our first big discovery. So in 2011, we launched the very first software development kit for our watch. We enabled people to write apps for their watch. And again, now there's apps for everything, but in 2011, it was still kind of a crazy idea to actually have an app store and download apps for your watch.
You were still at Y Combinator at the time, right? Or
yeah, Y Combinator is pretty much just kind of a rough organization. We were working out of a living room in Mountain View with our interns in half the house and us and the partner in the other half. The early days of the SDK were incredible. We had only sold about 1,000 watches. So all around the world, there's 1,000 watches. And within the first 2 or 3 months after the SDK launched, there were 100 apps available for Pebble. So that's a ratio of 1 app for every 10 watches, 1 new app for every 10 watches. So what we realized was that the early group of people that bought Pebble were actually hackers. They were actually developers. Even if they weren't all coders themselves, they were excited, they were interested, they were trying out these apps. And it was not an easy experience. It was not like the App Store. You had to basically do a firmware update on your watch just to install a new app. And it was a complete hack. We didn't design it originally to have an SDK. We just kind of added it on later. But man, we learned very quickly that what we had built, which was originally just like a single purpose, it showed text messages and wrist, was actually a platform, was actually something that other people were interested in building on top of. But we were in the Valley, and we made a watch that worked with BlackBerry. And I would talk to investors, I would talk to anybody, and the first question they would ask would be, hey, does this work with my iPhone? And I would have to say, no, it works with BlackBerry though. And like, oh, okay. Interested, people were definitely interested, but we didn't have product market fit. We hadn't figured out the way to explain it, the argument why someone would put this onto their wrist, and more importantly, there were still some kind of super rough edges around the product. So in the summer of 2011, Apple released iOS 5. iOS 5 had one big change that affected us. It enabled third parties to run their apps in the background. And up until this point, there were no background APIs available to a Bluetooth device like Pebble in iOS. So we took our prototype, once iOS 5 came out, we kind of hacked it to work with iPhone, and we had a prototype. We had finally the first smartwatch that would work with iPhone. We applied to we had to go through the paperwork of becoming like a registered iPhone accessory maker, MFI. We took everything that we learned, all these lessons that we learned from Impulse. The first watch that we made had a full color screen. It was heavy, it was metal. It had a 1-day battery life. It wasn't waterproof. We learned all these things from our customers. They were like, it has to be like a watch. It has to work like a watch. It has to have a screen that's always on. It has to be waterproof. It has to be something that I'm not constantly worrying about. I don't want to worry about getting it wet. I don't want to have to worry about charging it. I just want it to kind of work in my life. And we took all those things and we applied it. We went back to the drawing board and we built Pebble, which is exactly what we posted on Kickstarter. It's a watch that works as a watch first. It shows the time, the screen's always on. It looks a lot more like a watch than a computer on your wrist. It has a black and white e-paper screen, which means that it doesn't use much power, means that it looks great outside under direct sunlight. Like if you've ever held your iPhone out and tried to see what it is under direct sunlight, it's kind of annoying. And with a watch, you want to be able to see, first off what time it is, and then some of the smart features. We made it waterproof so that people could use it swimming. We had some app vendors that were like, hey, you guys have an accelerometer in the watch. We'd love to run software on it that can detect strokes and basically create like a swimming Fitbit.
Yeah, Fitbit doesn't work in the water.
Yeah, exactly. So we thought there was an opportunity there. And this was, before we got money, this is just like, we were still two guys in the living room.
And you launched it on Kickstarter, you did, or?
We launched on Kickstarter. We tried our best to raise money before that. Even using like the network from Y Combinator, we were unable to raise money.
From traditional VCs? Or
yeah, or even angels and seed. Like,
okay.
Has anyone tried to raise money here? Yeah.
What was the pushback?
The pushback was, I think predominantly we hadn't figured out. I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, product market fit is the biggest one. We hadn't figured out exactly how we were going to explain the product in such a way that people would just be compelled to buy it. We were still explaining it with a little bit too much of that, hey, this is a piece of the future, this is a smart new platform and ecosystem. We were pitching two steps ahead of where we actually were product-wise. So if anything, I think what going on Kickstarter did, so we got turned down, we weren't able to raise money, and we had heard about this thing called Kickstarter, and some companies had just, so this is 2012, has anyone backed something on Kickstarter? Or 5 things, or 10 things, 20 things, 30 things. Pretty much any hardware project that comes across Kickstarter, I'll put the money in. But no, it wasn't
But
very
at the
well
time, it wasn't
no,
that well known. I mean, we were still kind of wondering, hey, is this thing going to take off as an investment platform?
Crowdfunding was
What's going to happen
unknown at that point. Like the first project that I ever invested in on Kickstarter was actually another watch, and it was that iPod Nano watch that would take an iPod Nano and you kind of snap it in and it becomes a watch. That was my first project that I ever backed on Kickstarter.
But you did pretty well on Kickstarter.
We did, and I think the reason why we did well is we didn't talk. We finally figured out that we had to talk to consumers. We had to talk directly to customers and convince them that they should put hard-earned cash on the table for a product that doesn't even exist, so that they could get some benefit. And the benefit that we talked about were notifications, being able to receive text messages, that whole biking, the original biking pitch. The second one was sports and fitness. We'd seen people start to use Fitbits, we'd seen them using Strava and Runkeeper on the phone. And what we offered with Pebble, and we do offer with Pebble, is the ability for you to run the app on your phone, like Runkeeper or Map My Run or Endomondo or that kind of thing, put it in your back pocket while you're running or cycling or hiking, and then be able to see, have this basically like a sixth sense of your speed, your distance, your time, your elevation, all on your wrist, without actually buying a Garmin, without having to buy a full-blown GPS watch. It was a golf app at launch. You could see your distance to hold at all times. That was really compelling. And the third one, that was kind of a little bit going out onto a limb, was the idea that people would want to customize their watch, to change the watch face, download different watch faces, or to create their own. So those 3 things that we talked about, notifications, sports and fitness, and watch faces, were literally all that we talked about on Kickstarter. We made it, we kind of solved all those bugs that people had, like we made it longer battery life, worked with iPhone and Android, and we fixed all those rough edges, and then we simplified the pitch. And that worked, that took off.
Yeah, so at the time, I think it was the most successful Kickstarter campaign. How many people? I think you raised
70,000 people.
70,000 people, you raised 10 million at the time. And I think that's been surpassed by other Kickstarter.
Yeah, we just got passed by a cooler.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
It's a
Cooler that has a blender and a radio.
I backed it.
USB.
I backed it.
Oh, you did? Of course.
I helped them pass Pebble, but I'm going to get a blender with a friggin' margarita blender.
And why did I do that? Yeah, cool, yeah.
Yeah.
So you backed, so it was a successful campaign, and suddenly you had product to deliver.
Yeah, suddenly we had, so if anyone's ever had investors, try having 70,000 investors who won't put $100 in that eagerly want their watch. So our next problem became a communication thing. We had 70,000 backers. We got hired 7 of my friends. We had a 10-person company at that point, and we had to ship 85,000 watches. We set a completely unrealistic timeline for us at the beginning, so we had to change that a little bit. But we ended up shipping the first Pebbles 9 months after our Kickstarter project closed. And that's for a group of people that had never shipped any sort of consumer electronics ever. No one on our team had even worked at a consumer electronics company before, let alone shipped a product. So trial by fire, definitely a lot of that.
So how did you transition from there to raising money at Charles River Ventures?
So a year after our Kickstarter, we had already shipped a couple, maybe like 10 or 20,000 watches. We had a pretty good idea that what we had tapped into was larger than just that initial. So a lot of the questions on people, investors always have questions. The next question after we had proven that we had product market fit was, is this just a flash in the pan? Or is this actually something? So half the people said, is this just a flash in the pan, or do you know what to do again? The other half said, isn't Apple just going to come into this space and roll over top of you? So you're kind of screwed coming or going in that respect. But we found an investor who, in Charles River Ventures, who believed in the cause, who understood that we were building a platform, something bigger than just a single product, and ended up investing $15 million in us. And that was only when we just started, like, they took a massive bet on us because we only shipped maybe like 20,000, 30,000 units.
They were the sole investor in that round too, right? Yes.
And then,
George Zachary?
Yeah, and then, well, 1 year after, we shipped 400,000 to our customers. So I think they made a pretty decent little bet on a small company. But the question remained, what happens when Google comes into your market? What happens when Apple comes into your market?
Well, that kind of leads into what I want to ask.
Yeah,
it's an obvious question.
Pretty prepared for that because people have been asking that question for the last 4 years. So I'm happy to say that Apple has actually come out and explained what the hell they're working on. I think that it's much easier to actually talk about a somewhat tangible, even though it's not shipped yet, it's still a tangible product versus the kind of invisible unicorn that could be literally anything. Right up until the launch of the iWatch, people were like, it's going to be a snap bracelet, it's going to be transparent, it's going to be... No, but I think what they made is a watch. It's a nice piece of hardware. It's a beautiful, expensive gold, silver, high-quality material watch. And when I started out working on this, I was a 22-year-old university kid. There were actually a couple other watches on the market back in 2008. There was a Sony Ericsson watch that cost $399. And as a 22-year-old kid who wanted to go biking with his watch to see his text messages, I wasn't going to be able to shell out $399. So I did the only logical thing, which is to start an entire company just to make a product. But the point stands. The point stands that, like, Pebble, it's $99 to buy a Pebble. You can go to the Best Buy now and pick one up. I think we're putting our money where our mouth is and saying this is the beginning of a much larger trend in computing. And while by no means is this the final stop on the journey, it is important for us to set out and to get units into the field, to get watches onto people's wrists. And we're willing to do what it takes to get there. And part of that is spreading it to make it affordable, to make it accessible, to make it something that the hackers that write apps for it can actually go out and buy it and just start working on it.
But it's a much more competitive market now. Granted, the price point is lower than Apple's.
So there's Apple, there's Google, and there's Pebble, and each one of those tracks are quite distinctive. Apple's perspective is we're making a timepiece, we're making this beautiful, beautiful watch. That's totally cool. I think that's a valid thing. People do buy expensive watches. It's not unrealistic. Google's perspective, we're bringing the smartphone to the wrist. We're bringing full color screens. We're building touch screens. We're doing everything it takes to kind of like rope people into the Google ecosystem a little bit more. And then Pebble, on the other hand, is this open, friendly, accessible alternative. For cost, it works with whatever phone you have. It works as a great watch as well as being a smartwatch. It doesn't run out of batteries every 24 hours. And over the longer time frame, our goal is to see how this can actually become its own computing platform rather than becoming solely an accessory for the phone. Kind of rely on it for everything.
Now, have you seen sales pick up this year? Is what I saw in advance of the Apple iWatch announcement.
Yeah, there's an immense amount of kind of attention on the iWatch.
I mean, has it helped to uplift maybe uplift the market, bring attention to? Do you expect that to continue?
We're expecting a pretty exciting little Christmas season coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I was kind of blown. I remember when you did the Kickstarter campaign, when this was sort of a weird thing. And I was at my mom's house. Yeah, she still gets a newspaper, and I was looking through the Best Buy ads, and I saw Pebble in there. I'm like, whoa, what a trip! I mean, it's like so mainstream now. Do you see the cost actually becoming even more attractive to consumers?
Swatch has done an amazing job at creating this not cheap, not super low cost, but $50 to $100 range where people buy multiple watches. They buy the watch that reflects their style.
Sure.
I think we're probably not going to get that inexpensive. It's not going to be possible for you to have like tons of different Pebbles. But we're looking at accessories, we're looking at straps. There's already a whole community of different companies that build accessories for Pebble. We publish all of the 3D drawings on GitHub so that anyone can just fork them and build their own stuff. And people can make it their own. People can make it reflect their own.
Yeah. So you started, I mean, you said it very clearly, you started because you wanted to see notifications when you were on your bike.
Yeah.
It manifested itself as a watch. Are you a watch company at the end of the day, or is there a greater vision for Pebble?
No, I hesitate to say that we're a watch company. If we were a watch company, we'd be a pretty weird watch community. We have 60 to 70% of our companies like software engineers. So no, we're not a watch company per se. I'd say that right now we're devices and services company. We're working heavily on how can we make this form of computing the way that people can interact with the internet, interact with other things around their life, and then as kind of connected devices grow even more, this becomes more of a always omnipresent remote control for what's around you.
Duncan, did you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you think there's voice or voice notes. I mean, it's hard to type on that, but you can talk to it and if it traces you.
Voice is interesting. I've tried the Google Watches and tried it out. I don't think that voice has been cracked yet. It's still too annoying. Like, if I have to repeat myself 1 in 10 times, I'm just going to pull out my phone and do it. And I think that may change over time. I'm really, really hoping that it may change over time, but right now it's still.
Well, can I follow up? I agree with that. I mean, but you could also either have human curation behind the voice system, or you could use it like Dick Tracy, and I could send you a voice note.
I think that's probably more along the lines of what
So I send you a voice note, you get it asynchronously, you can talk right back. It sort of avoids a lot of the problem of a bad voice connection. But what I'm really trying to get at is that a more natural interface to the wrist?
Do you use Siri? Do you use Siri on a regular basis?
No, I tried it and it sucked big time. Google now is saying I got a Nexus 5.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. There's a lot of startups.
No, but the voice note thing I'm thinking about, Apple's got that great gesture now in iOS 8. I haven't used it, but I think it's cool. You've seen this.
How many people use Siri on a regular basis? Every day?
There are some people that do.
Every hour? Yeah. And I think, some people use it, they almost use it as like a command line. You know the commands and you execute the commands and it goes through.
Yes.
In your positioning of the product, especially that you started it in Europe, you know very well that in Europe watches represent your identity, your social status, and from Rolexes and all the Swiss watches. Have you considered creating a $100,000 version of your watch?
Exactly
That I would love
$100,000.
my space rocket that I could wear?
I would be happy to sell you one of our Pebble Steels for $100,000. No
Well,
problem
I think you can do it like today. It's just a matter of positioning and getting into the right places.
I would agree. I'd say that a lot of, like, if you look at that luxury cell phone maker, Virtue, they do that exactly. They take fairly commodity hardware, dress it up, add some rubies and gems.
Plus you have a nice story that goes with it that can be part of the
We'll definitely.
and the more software and capabilities question. From my life and my past experiences as an entrepreneur, I was working on designing a cell phone, and actually it was in Italy, to receive, it was a few years back, two pushcasts of the video that are vitally important to me based on my lifestyle. So let's say video of Formula One and of the race. So when I'm on the bike or doing something, I can see it. Is your software and your platform capable of getting
Probably not.
30 seconds videos?
Probably not
the
video.
ones?
You'd have to. It would be black and white, and it would be fairly choppy right now. But text, I think I really like getting push notifications on my watch to see like instantaneously some kind of contact me. Is it important? Is it something that I can do later?
And are you seeing more maybe connected home apps feeding into the Pebble?
Yeah, there's a great Nest app. I control my door locks. I control my garage door from my watch. It's coming along. I think iBeacon is extremely interesting. The idea that Pebble will be able to know what's around you just by virtue of there being these little sensors that are kind of embedded in things. Yeah.
Okay. So, oh, yes, the question.
Do you know about New Air, the batteries company?
New where?
New Air.
Oh, is it the mesh networking?
No, it's a beacon company.
Yeah. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, but generally, like Pebble's got a Bluetooth LE radio, so you can connect and you can see by beacons and other sensors and other devices around you. So.
Excellent. So, the iWatch question. Are you going to be okay? Are you going to survive the iWatch?
I think we'll be okay. I think there's definitely room in the market. I think that what we've seen already is the increased attention, increased interest in space has generated a lot of sales. I think it's going to be a tough battle. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of stories in the valley of companies that have that you need to constantly stay ahead of what's coming next. And I think Apple's tipped their hand, at least on the hardware side, of what's coming out. I expect some pretty interesting things in 2015 from Pebble.
Okay. Eric, you have another question?
Yeah, I want to build on your question a little bit, which is, you talk a lot about the technology of Pebble and the amazing directions I think we all imagine this can go. At the same time, you're being challenged. I think you offered her to sell her a steel, aka the fashion side of it. I think this question was, at some point, our identities are fashion-driven, less than technology-driven. How do you think about that in terms of building a company that has to build an amazing technology platform, but has to deal with the foibles and the ups and downs of fashion?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Our perspective, customization and personalization. I think that what a little company can do is be much more flexible about what it lets users do. So for example, like we've open sourced the entire design of the watch. That's caused an immense number of people to make straps and covers and bands. And there's a Kickstarter project with different bike mounts and different ways that you can kind of dress your Pebble up. But I look at us as not as the arbiters of taste, not as the ones who will dictate what the world is going to wear on their wrists, but making a smart platform that is extensible, it's affordable, that lets you customize it and make it your own. That's how we stay on people's wrists. Like that's how we get attention and engagement, is by letting people customize it, choose the watch face that reflects there. They can even make their own watch face. There's been over 250,000 watch faces generated using a watch face generator for Pebble. And yeah, it's exciting, that level of like, you don't have to just go to the store and buy what's sitting on the shelf. You can buy it, take it home, remake it, remix it, and make it your own.
Are Best Buy still around?
Best Buy are still around. Yeah, that changes on a yearly basis.
Another place to buy Apple products.
Well, that one closed.
Yeah.
Okay. You're home. Okay. Well, my watch says it's time. But Eric Migicovsky, thank you very much. And,